All right, guys. So went to my brother's last night and had to get some cantilevers made up and some other parts made up. We did some LS header flanges and stuff because we're gonna have to build them headers from scratch. Um, it's so he did some flanges for my turbos, did some flanges for the headers, did some collector flanges for us that are going to go to the turbo also. We'll probably get on those here in a day or two and start building that. But right now, working on the cantilevers. Uh, I kind of showed you the pattern on those, and then last night I ramped to his place, and we were there till like 12:30 last night, trying to get these things cut out and get everything done. Um, did some test cutting on some stainless because we really weren't sure how the stainless was going to react. You really need gas on stainless when you cut it. It makes it a lot nicer, but we played with the settings quite a bit at his place and come up with a really good setting. It cut pretty nice, wasn't too awful bad, didn't put much slag on it and stuff. So that took some time, but we got it. Took care of it. It worked out really well. Of course, I could have sent the file out to have it, laser or probably water jet would be best, but we ain't got time for that. So as long as he can do a pretty good job on his plasma table, that's what we'll do with it. But here's the cantilevers. I've got one done, so I can kind of show you, what it looks like. But there's the cantilever, welded up, tubes all in it, 1 inch wide down the center. So here's the next set I still got to do. But so when I did these, basically, I took that 3/4 bolt hole and I made me a perfect 1 inch spacer to go in here. And then I come down here and I took the 1/2 inch bolt hole on this end, which goes to the shock, and I made myself a perfect 1 inch spacer to go in here. And then I just bolted these two together. You need some way to hold these things squared up. So now it's nice and square. It was held together, and then we could go and put our tubes in. These tubes here in, and then this tube right here, and this is where your bearing's going to be. That's what it's going to rotate on. So we ended up, putting all those in. I just kind of laid this thing flat on the table with those spacers in it, and it worked out pretty good because it sits right down in these holes on this table, and there's a couple different ways you can do it, but so set those down, and when I put these slugs in, I dropped the slugs in all these holes, and then I took a clamp and I put something like this halfway across that hole, and I clamped these down, and I would tack one side of that and then go back and tack the other side as I had it all clamped down the whole time. And then once I got it all welded up, I left it clamped. I probably left it clamped for, I don't know. I like my stuff. You've probably heard me say it before. Once I get done welding and something's hot, I like to clamp it to a flat table really good. I mean, just clamp that sucker down with a couple good clamps and just let it sit there and cool. I like to let them get down to dang near room temperature. It seems like to me when you do that, and you take the time to do that, you get a whole lot less warpage. So whenever I have time to do that, and I really try to let stuff cool. You feel like you're wasting time sitting there waiting for it, but honestly, in the long run, it's a big difference, and if you pull it right off that table hot, man, I'll about bet money that thing's going to be warped. It's going to pull side to side. And some stuff it may not bother you, it's okay, but this is going down between two frame rails. It's going to be in a tight area, so we don't want this thing warped. We don't want it pulled off to one side. We want it to stay fairly close to the center of these frame rails as it's moving, because there's not going to be a lot of clearance. This thing's 1 3/8 on the outside, and we have a total of like 3 inches between these frame rails, so there's not a lot of room. There's not a lot of room for movement. So anyway, that's what we got right now, and I'm gonna get on the other one, put it together, and we'll do some high speed on me doing the other one, so it won't be boring sitting there watching me weld this thing up. But yeah, wanted to get the first one done first so I could show you what it looked like done, and as we got to build it. So I'm gonna get putting this thing together, and we'll get it welded up. All right. All right, so we got this one welded up and stuff, all ready to go. It's cooling right now. Like I said before, you know, we take this thing and clamp it down when we're done. So it's just kind of just simple. I mean, don't need a bunch of clamps all over it. We just don't want it to draw. You know, that thing it'll come up like that. You know, it'll really warp pretty good as it's cooling down. And you know, as long as it's still nice and hot when you clamp it, honestly, it ought to come out really straight when it's done. So this is all we're doing. I mean, it's, you know, there's the last one. Like I said, it's bolted together with the two 1-inch spacers in between, and then I just clamp everything down to the table, and that's going to sit there for 15, 20 minutes, whatever it takes. When I come over here and put my hand on it, I don't want it to be hardly any warmer than room temperature. A little bit's not going to be bad, but you know, you want it to get down pretty low. You want to be able to hang on to that thing and not have it even get warm on your hands. So, I mean, I'm not going to say it has to be done that way. That's just how I do it. So, you know, everybody can do it their own way, whatever works for you, really. But, you know, this way has always seemed to work for me, so I do it. I don't know. I'm going to let that cool down and get them on there, get them mocked up. You know, we'll see what we got. You know, those, you know, we've mocked it up with the paper, but I haven't yet mocked it up with those. So we're gonna put those on here in a bit. And let me see. I'm gonna go. I don't think I showed you these. So of course the COM 12 bearings, you've already seen those. So you know, I'm not sure if I'm going with COM 12s in this, or if we're going to be if I'm going with a bearing type, maybe. Let me see. I gotta find this bearing. Oh, right here. So I've used these before in the past, and it is, you know, just a little. I don't know. I can't remember the OD on it. I think it's maybe 1.25 OD, but it's a 3/4 ID. So a 3/4 bolt fits right through this thing. And I used these on my last truck, and they did really well. You know, you're probably wondering why we're not using Delrin. You know, we use Delrin on the rear. On the rear cantilevers had Delrin in them. But the problem with this one is we've got to make this pretty skinny. So our Delrin would be really narrow. We'd only have about, you know, 1 inch, a little over 1 inch of Delrin in there to wear on. The whole front of the car with the engine and everything is going to be lifted by this. So I was a little concerned that the Delrin wouldn't hold up being that skinny. So basically I've decided we're going with a bearing, and haven't exactly decided which type of bearing. So if we do a COM 12, we're going to do doubles. You know, you can't do them single. I'll show you. So you can't really do a COM 12 single in there because it's going to tilt side to side. You know, so if that's in there, it'll tilt this way, this way, this way. If we do doubles and they're all locked together, one piece, they can't turn like that because they'll be pressed into an outside race. So I can do 2 COM 12s, or I can do 2 of these, and honestly, I haven't decided yet. The COM 12 is probably stronger, you know, because this bearing gets so small. It's a ball type bearing, but it gets so small that the balls inside are not very big. So I don't know. I haven't decided. And like I said, I've used these before. I used those on my last truck, and it had 12 valve Cummins in it, and we never had an issue with them. And so I may go that route because those fit right in that tubing perfect. No machine work, no nothing. It fits perfect. But the COM 12s, I think I have to run a reamer through with the COM 12s, and I didn't do that before I welded them in, so it'll be a lot more difficult to do it now. You know, I could have done it a lot easier before I put them in, but you know, I didn't think about the COM 12s until afterwards. So I don't know. I'll probably just go with the bearing type because I've used them and they work and they hold up. So in the worst case scenario, if one wears out, you just pop them out and put new ones in. They're dirt cheap. It's a really cheap bearing. I don't know if there's a part number on this thing or not, but yeah. What's nice is it's shouldered too. I mean, you can see close enough there or not. It's got a shoulder right here, so it actually slides into the tube, and then the shoulder hits it. It stops. So now you also You have to remember, you have to put something between this and the other bearing, because there's going to be two bearings side by side. If you don't put something between them, then that thing's going to squeeze down, and you're going to over tighten your bearing. You're going to side load that bearing, and it'll wipe it out in no time. So you have to remember, if you're doing this type, you have to put a spacer between on that inner race. Let me see. You can kind of see here. So right here on the inner race, if there's two bearings, another one stacked here, there has to be, a tube between these. When you tighten that bolt down, it needs to tighten down on the inner race. You can't, it has to tighten down between the two. So, that's a must. You will absolutely wipe that bearing out in a hurry. You're liable to actually break the bearing when you tighten the bolt down. So be careful with that. But the COM 12s, what's kind of nice about those is if I stack two of these COM 12s together, it actually fits in the piece that I made perfect. Like it was made for it. I didn't make it for that, but it works right. But like I said, I got to do a little machine work to that if I'm going to use COM 12s. I'm going to look and see what size reamers I have. If I have a reamer that'll work with that, then I may just stick it in the milling machine and run a reamer through it. But I don't know. We're gonna find out. I don't know. I'll figure it out like everything else. But we're gonna do a mock-up on it as soon as that thing cools down a little bit. We'll mock it up and show you what it looks like.